You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Hello and welcome to TV-Marywood's live election coverage. I'm one of your hosts, Colby Hughes.
Tonight's broadcast will consist of live election results with me, Kyle Driscoll, student-made packages, two panelists here to discuss some of the main topics of conversation surrounding this election, and our room of writers just one floor above us.
TV-Marywood last covered the election in 2016, in which Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton ran for president. We are glad to be back after 8 years.
For those who don't know, Marywood University is located in northeastern Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a long history of being a battleground state, choosing 20 of the last 25 presidents. Lackawanna County, which is where Marywood University is located, was blue in 2020, voting for President Joe Biden. This area is one of great interest as we usually are nearly surrounded by red counties, save for Monroe County, like in 2020 and 2016.
In 2020, Biden won Pennsylvania by 1.2%, or by 80,000 votes. In Lackawanna County, Biden won by almost 10,000 votes, or 8.4%. This election will likely be as close as the 2020 election, and there is a high likelihood that Pennsylvania may be the deciding state. With 19 electoral votes, Pennsylvania has the most out of the 7 swing states this election. The swing states that could flip the election in one direction or the other include, out in the west, Arizona and Nevada, in the south, North Carolina and Georgia, and around the Great Lakes, Wisconsin, Michigan, and of course, Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania, polling opened this morning at 7 a.m. and should be closed right about now. Like the other swing states of Georgia and Michigan, Pennsylvania was finally able to start counting mail-in ballots just this morning when the polls opened. So there's a high chance that we will not know the final count by the end of this broadcast.
While we might not be able to tell you our state's results tonight, we can definitely show you everything we've prepared for this broadcast. We've got student-made packages and interviews. To name a few, there are professor interviews, a breakdown of each candidate's history, a brief on the Electoral College, and many more. We've got our two lovely panelists here to represent their respective political parties that we'll be speaking to soon. And we've got my co-host Kyle here with the map for our election results.
Before we get to any polls, let's take a look at the 2024 presidential candidates. Harris and Trump have been running on some pretty starkly different policies. Let's move to our first student-made package of the night for a rundown of those policies this election.
With arguably one of the most polarizing presidential elections in recent history, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have stark differences when it comes to policy. We are going to break down key policy issues that voters are focusing on and where the two main candidates stand on those issues.
The economy is a critical issue among most American voters. The Harris campaign has set its sights on building up the middle class, introducing what they're calling an opportunity economy. Harris's economic strategy includes a ban on price gouging, reducing health care costs, providing incentives to increase housing supply, and raising taxes for the wealthy. The Trump campaign has pledged to end inflation and make America affordable again. Trump's economic strategy includes reducing energy prices and auto insurance, lowering interest rates, and conducting a deportation operation on potentially 11 million immigrants in an attempt to bring down housing costs.
Moving on to trade, both candidates are continuing to focus on China, but are taking different approaches. Harris is expected to maintain the tariffs of the Biden-Harris administration, such as banning imports that can be traced back to forced labor. Harris will also rally allies to do the same in the name of preventing trade diversion. Trump has made it clear that he will raise the tariffs on imported goods from China up to 60%. Trump also suggested a 10 to 20% tariff on most imported goods and lowering the rate of corporate tax for companies to stay in the states to manufacture goods.
Gun ownership is an ever-present topic in conversation nowadays, and neither candidate plans to take away your guns. The Harris campaign is focused on preventing gun violence and plans to do so by expanding background checks or placing a ban on assault weapons. The Trump campaign is expected to terminate laws made by the Biden-Harris administration on guns. Trump has made it apparent that he will defend the right to bear arms.
Immigration has become one of the most critical issues for voters. The Harris campaign is focusing on border security and plans to double down on asylum claims. Harris pledges to sign into law a bill that would hire more border agents and change the standard for claiming asylum. The Trump campaign has openly stated that a deportation operation would begin on day one. Trump would reinstate policies from his administration like the Remain in Mexico program and the migrant protection protocols.
Foreign policy is another key issue voters are paying attention to. The Harris campaign has vowed to support Ukraine and supports Israel's right to defend itself while still being vocal about the toll it is taking on Palestinian lives. The Trump campaign has plans to settle the Russia-Ukraine war and supports Israel's right to defend itself.
Healthcare is a heavy topic this election. The Harris campaign has pledged to restore Roe v. Wade and pass the Equality Act and proposes increases in the public health budget. The Trump campaign stands by the overturning of Roe v. Wade, plans to limit gender-affirming care, and proposes budget cuts to federal public health programs.
Climate has quickly become a top issue for voters. Harris is expected to continue support for clean energy, supports the Inflation Reduction Act, and will not ban fracking. Trump has promised to expand drilling in the Arctic and plans to change parts of the Inflation Reduction Act.
With Harris and Trump battling it out in the polls today, voters will see what policy stances America feels more aligned with.
Policies that voters are paying attention to. Let's talk about the most important issues to voters.
According to the Pew Research Center, the most important issue this election is the economy. In fact, 8 out of 10 registered voters say so. After the economy is healthcare, which has 65% of voters. After that, and down the list, we have Supreme Court appointments at 63%, foreign policy at 62%, violent crime and immigration both at 61%, gun policy at 56%, abortion at 51%, and racial and ethnic inequality and climate change both at 37%.
That was across the board amongst just registered voters, and of no surprise to anyone when we look at important issues by supporters of the two candidates, the ranking changes. For Trump supporters, the economy is still number one with 93%, then we have immigration at 82%, and violent crime follows at 76%. Some of the lesser important issues among Trump supporters include racial and ethnic inequality at 18% and climate change at 11%.
For Harris supporters, healthcare takes the cake at 76%, followed closely by Supreme Court appointments at 73%. After those two are the economy at 68% and abortion at 67%. We talk about these issues because this is what the American people are voting on, and if a candidate doesn't align with their views, they're not getting their vote.
When we look at the 2020 election's most important issues to voters, there have been some changes. Also from the Pew Research Center, the economy reigns up the top. Immigration has risen 9% since 2020, as about 6 out of 10 voters say it is critical to their vote. Abortion has risen in importance since 2020. Amongst Trump's votes, abortion was at 46% and is now at 35%, while Democratic candidate supporters had abortion at 35% in 2020 and at 67% this election.
We will be checking in with our panel about their candidates' stances on issues a bit later, but for now we're going to take a short break.
Election day is now here, which means that it's important to
That to him. He finds Franco. Backdoor pass. Bousman with the jam! Austin Bousman! The backdoor caught set up by Franco with the huge jam!
You there, skinny guy with the glasses.
So Randy, your character Skin Graft, like is that closely related to you? Like I thought you just got arrested yesterday.
Well, Skin Graft was, I just thought, you know, what's going to be funny? An old prospector showing up out of nowhere. And I had another guy plan to play him, but things fell through there, so I had to take up the mantle. Yeah, you with the mustache.
What were some of the behind the scenes of the production and what that atmosphere was like?
So the atmosphere was pretty chill. We had, we had the crew there, the actors. It was pretty good. Got it knocked out in about 3 hours. No real complaints, honestly. It was pretty good, pretty good. You back there with the fashionable hat.
Who is Don Cheadle?
I hope everybody gets to enjoy it. I'm glad you guys seem to have liked it. And I hope you enjoy it when it airs. How was that?
Take the friggin' points this week! Well, you have no run game. Then you can play action. How you play action with no run game?
Number one.
Yeah, nothing beats number one.
I'm sorry. Former Oklahoma Sooner, now for UL Monroe. General duty. What?
You think Kelsey's going to be, the prime target again?
Welcome back to TV-Marywood's 2024 election coverage.
Gen Z voter turnout is a big topic of conversation in the last presidential election, and it still is for this election. The 2020 election was among the 3 highest turnout elections in decades. About 2/3 of eligible voters in the United States voted in the 2020 election. Since 1900, that's been the highest rate for any national election. When we narrow it down to eligible voters of ages 18 to 29, which is comprised of both Gen Z and millennials, 50% voted in the 2020 election. Something interesting to note, per the Circle Center for Information and Research, is that the youth turnout from 2016 to 2020 was at its highest in states where absentee ballots were sent automatically to registered voters.
On most college campuses in America, during an election year, there are opportunities for students to register to vote, as well as a general push for students to exercise their right to vote. A vast majority of undergrad students are Gen Z. According again to the Circle Center for Information and Research, there are 41 million members of Gen Z who are eligible to vote. As of a week ago, 9 states have more people ages 18 to 29 registered to vote than they did in 2020. These states include Michigan, Nevada, and North Carolina. 3 of the key battleground states will be taking a look at tonight, as well as Kansas, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Colorado.
When we narrow it down further to people aged 18 to 19 registering to vote, the amount of states seeing an increase gets bigger. There are at least 13 states in which this is happening. Those states include Michigan, Nevada, Montana, Tennessee, Illinois, Oregon, New York, Colorado, Georgia, Washington, Kansas, Ohio, and Maine. Let's check in with our panel made up of Gen Z voters.
Hello, my name is Casey Jeanette. I am your moderator for this panel. With me, I have a registered Democrat and a registered Republican. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lindsay Jason, and I am a registered Democrat on campus.
My name is Zachary Houston, and I'm a registered Republican on campus.
All right, so as members of Gen Z, how has your political party been grabbing your attention specifically, as well as other young voters? Zach, would we like to start with you?
Sure. I think some of the big things that we are looking at with my generation is the economy. Pretty soon, most of us will be out of college, especially through this next election cycle, whoever is president. And we're looking for jobs, we're looking for housing, and just the rising cost of everything. So I think, at least with Trump, we are seeing a lot of his rhetoric with my generation, Gen Z, is how he's going to make it cheaper for us. Because right now, it is pitiful how much everything costs.
Lindsay, would you like to follow up on that?
Yeah, so for Kamala Harris, we are seeing lots of talk about healthcare, women's healthcare specifically, and we are seeing this in the form of political ads targeting young women and also men who either have a wife, children, young girls, stuff like that. So we're seeing lots of stuff about abortion and also the rhetoric that former President Donald Trump has been spewing and how dangerous to the democracy it is.
Mm-hmm. All right, so bouncing off of that, what are some of the more pressing issues that have to do with not only your generation, but the generations of the future?
Me again?
Sure.
Okay. I would say definitely our foreign engagements and what we're involved in overseas. Obviously, we have a lot going on that especially has arisen in the last 4 years under Joe Biden. Not necessarily completely his fault per se, but the Ukraine situation with Russia, and then obviously Palestine and Israel. So just looking at stuff like that, a lot of male voters, at least on the Republican side, are worried about how is this going to affect war going forward. Could there be more involvement from our country as time moves on? Because a draft is something some people worry about. Some think it's not possible. Well, it was only our grandparents that were drafted just 2-3 generations ago. So that's something definitely in the forefront of many minds, I'd say, is how are our foreign engagements working. And even I think on the Democratic side, I think that there's obviously a large number of Democrats especially worried with both of those wars and how we move forward.
Mm-hmm. And Lindsay, on your side.
I was about to say, I agree with you. Lots of Democrats. I want to really highlight the conflict that's been happening with Israel and Palestine. Lots of Democrats are obviously very concerned about that and have obviously been calling that a genocide and want the United States government to get more involved with that and put an end to it and try and help the Palestinian people. They're not too happy. I think we both could say that Republicans and Democrats are not too happy about how both candidates present a solution to that situation. Obviously, the United States stands with Israel. That's where we could start talking about Jill Stein, but we won't do that.
Yeah, we'll save that for later.
Yeah, we'll save that. But I totally agree. Conflicts, overseas conflicts, definitely. And also for Democrats, lots of talks on housing and getting affordable housing, because we're the young people.
Absolutely, we can agree with that on
And
this side too.
our parents got it for so cheap, and we don't know what we're going to do right now.
Yeah, and it seems to me that at our core, most of us want what we need. But moving forward with that, we'll throw it over to Colby and Kyle, and they will fill us in on what's coming up next.
We now know the next president must gain 270 electoral votes, but what exactly is the Electoral College and how does it work? Let's find out with TV-Marywood's Lindsay Jason.
Election day is now here, which means that it's important to understand the Electoral College and how it works. Made up of 538 electors, a presidential candidate must win a majority, which is 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. Each state has the same number of electors as it has representatives in its congressional delegation, one for each member of the House of Representatives plus 2 senators. This system that is put in place by the United States Constitution allows for equal representation among all states, but means that a candidate can still lose the election even though they may win the popular vote. Some states, such as Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada, are crucial in determining who will win the presidency. These are considered swing states, which means that either candidate has a strong chance of winning in these locations. As the votes come in, it's important to keep an eye out on the swing states, especially Pennsylvania, since it may just decide who will win this election.
Let's hand it over to my co-host Kyle for the latest on the electoral map.
Thanks, Colby. NBC News has projected some of the following states that we have for the presidential election. It looks like we have about 9 states are trending for the Republican side. It looks like 4 Democratic victories have been predicted by NBC News. Not a lot of shockers in the offering of states that we have here. Indiana has been projected to be won by Donald Trump with 62.4% of the vote by Let's Count. No surprise there, as Indiana has been red since 1940. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, they also are projected to go for Trump. We don't have a percentage for them yet, but we'll get that soon. It looks like Kentucky is also trending for Trump at 70.1%. Again, these numbers are coming to us from NBC News. We'll have more updates on the electoral map coming up very shortly, and we'll be right back after these short messages.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Early voters broke turnout records this year. In PA, many people were able to vote early via mail-in ballots, like TVM's own Mary Pegarilla, who voted absentee for New York State. While the request deadline for mail-in ballots was October 29th, those who received one have until 8 p.m. on November 5th to get their ballots to their county election office. Those with ballots who changed their mind about voting by mail may surrender that ballot at their polling place in order to vote in person. Polls in PA are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day. With TVM News, this is Casey Jeanette.
Marywood's Chamber Singers is a small, select ensemble of Marywood students that performs mostly a cappella repertoire. This group, filled with passionate musicians, performs multiple times throughout the year. Members must pass an audition to join, but students of any major are welcome. The Chamber Singers' next performance will be held on November 24th at 2 p.m. in the Marian Chapel on campus. The ensemble will also make an appearance at the inauguration of Marywood's 13th president, Lisa Laurie. The Chamber Singers will also head to California this May for their annual tour. For more information, visit marywood.edu.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Welcome back to TV Marywood. Let's get back to our panel.
In a few minutes, we'll watch one of our students sit down with a professor to discuss some of the basic questions surrounding this election. Something that will come up in conversations is the importance of the economy in this election. For both our panelists, how is your party's candidate better for the United States economy, and how it will affect people like you and me, people who are making under $400,000 a year as consumers? Lindsay, let's start with you.
Yeah, so one of the main topics that Vice President Harris has outlined in her future plans would be a 400,000 people who make under 400,000 a year will not be paying more in taxes, which in itself extremely, extremely important for middle class families and individuals. Along with that, I want to really outline housing plans for Vice President Harris. She wants to make initiatives for getting housing cheaper, right? Which will undisputably strengthen the economy. And not just that, but help people have more money in their wallets. If you're not worrying about paying a super annoyingly high mortgage, you have more money for everything else, which is, I mean, come on, that's obvious. So she's proposing the first ever tax cut targeted at encouraging home builders to make affordable homes for first-time home buyers. So that's people like you and me who are going to need a home in the future, but people who own these homes making the price extremely high and unaffordable for everyday people.
All right, so bouncing off of what you said, and Zach, I'm going to ask you this question. Kamala Harris lays out a $25,000 first-time homepayers down payment assistance. How do you feel about that with your party?
I don't see how we're going to cap taxes at a certain amount of money if we're going to start giving out money. Of course, I'll be honest, just like the college relief plan that not Kamala, but Joe Biden put into place that was going to happen, it didn't happen. I just don't see the practicality. It's not like it's just the three of us getting free housing or or not free housing. We'll say 25,000. You said right? What's the number? $25,000 worth of money towards housing development. We'll say it's the whole country, or at least anyone who would apply, which would be almost anyone. I personally did not agree with even like the college situation, but again, I'm a college student with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. You know, I applied, nothing happened. I think there will be a similar outcome for the housing in that fact. Again, would it be awesome? Yes. But is it practical? I don't think so.
Now, I have a question for you following that. Do you think that with that going on, do you think that the reason why it didn't come to be is because of the split in Congress?
It could be. And again, and that's the other thing too. I guess she could promise this, and then if, let's say, Kamala were to win tonight, and let's say the House and the Senate were Republican, I mean, she could blame it on that. I mean, that is an easy thing to do. I mean, out of the last how many elections, usually you don't have all three. I think Trump had it for once, 2 years. So, I mean, it's possible that could be part of the reason. I just think that it's very unlikely with the amount of money we'd be putting into this program that we could do that without, breaking the bank.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're out of time here, but we're going to throw it back over to Kyle and Colby, and we will check back in.
As mentioned before, one of our students, Macy Markham, spoke to Professor Katie McNulty. Let's check it out.
Welcome back to TVM. I'm Macy Markham, and today I'm here with Professor Katie McNulty to talk about the election. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Macy.
Let's do it. Could you tell me about your political science background and your related experiences?
Sure. So before going to school in my graduate career to teach English, I actually went for political science. I found politics fascinating. At the time, it was the Bush-Kerry election when I declared that major. And I got to do a cool internship on Capitol Hill working for a congressman and got a lot of exposure. It was pretty neat.
That sounds neat. And how does it compare to previous elections in your opinion?
I think that there's some overlap. We have one candidate who has ran in the previous 3 elections, so we have some similar threads there. Right now, I think that the United States is seeing the impact of Supreme Court picks, so the significance of whether or not you like either candidate, that there is longer lasting power than just 4 years.
And what do you think are the biggest issues that will motivate people to come out and vote?
So So I did a little bit of research before this, and I looked on Pew Research Center, which indicates the economy is the nation's, up until when this was recorded, is the nation's primary issue of concern. But sometimes I think that it can be overshadowed by other topics that might be louder, so to speak. I think some driving motivations will be healthcare, education, reproductive rights as well.
And how do you think the election is shaping up for student voters?
For student voters, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't seen a whole lot of action on campus. I hope that it's happening under the radar a little bit. I know vote.org has made registering, checking your registration, mail-in ballots a lot easier, so there's less of having to fill out like a paper registration. So I'm hoping that students are involved and registered and have a plan.
And you did touch on it a little bit, but what do you think the political climate is like for students in the campus in general?
I think this year I've seen a lot more peace. I know that there are some topics on the table that we people on all sides of issues feel very passionately about, and sometimes with emotions it can get, we can forget to be a little bit civil, but I think that I haven't seen anything that's at least come on my radar so far, so I think everyone's being respectful.
How has the election impacted Marywood, if at all?
The election, I don't know if it's impacted Marywood, but the outcomes of the election certainly will. Everyone, you're all students, so whoever goes into office could ultimately decide issues around education, student loan forgiveness, and also on a larger scale, labor laws might be determined, so as far as what happens with employees. And so I don't know that the election itself, but the outcome certainly.
And obviously the presidential election is at the forefront of everyone's mind, but there are other positions to vote for as well. In your opinion, what are the other races that voters need to be paying attention to?
So I would advise voters to go to ballotopedia.com because it varies depending on your state, but also depending on your district. So in Pennsylvania, I know that we have a U.S. Senate seat. Depending on your district, you might have a U.S. House of Representatives or a state representative. We have Attorney General. We have Auditor General. Some states are having governor elections as well, so it really varies. So I encourage students to make sure ahead of time they know what's on the ballot. Some elections are going to have policies to vote on, whether it's at a state level or at a local level. So I urge them to make sure they're educated on who the candidates are, what their deal is.
And in a similar vein, what are some things students or anyone who might be watching this consideration as the election winds down and the transitions begin to take place?
I think making sure to fact check. It's easy to put anything out there and sound really intelligent. It's easy to scare people, and we're highly motivated by fear. It's a survival technique that we've evolved, so we're supposed to be. But I think it's incredibly crucial to make sure that what you hear, whether it be from a loved one or through the grapevine or, in conversation, or whether it's on TV by, a political pundit or a candidate, that you make sure that you fact check that that is actually the case, so that you're not voting on false emotion and a bunch of fallacies or rumors, and you're voting on issues that are legitimate and matter to you.
Lastly, are there any other comments or things that we didn't touch on that you'd like to talk about?
I do want to emphasize, have a plan to vote. So if you're voting in person, make sure that you have a plan. If there's traffic, you navigate around your class schedules, what you're going to do if there's a huge line at the polls, what you're going to do if, you're running late, what time are the polls open. If you are voting by mail, please know that at the time this is recorded, that it is too late to mail in your ballot, so you have to drop it off at your election office. Make sure you know where that is, when it's open, what the deal is with that, if you have to have someone see you do it. But that's my main advice. At this point, you're registered or you're not, so just make sure you have a plan and you account for any and every possible hindrance.
That's really good advice. So thank you so much for joining me today, Professor McNulty.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to TVM.
Something major happened for the Harris campaign just in the last week or so. On the week of October 23rd, 23 Nobel Prize-winning economists backed the economic proposals put forth by Harris that include building up the middle class, creating what the campaign is calling an opportunity economy, and lending a hand to small businesses.
This is a huge deal because, as we previously discussed, the economy is the #1 important issue for voters in this election. The letter, which CNN received first, reads, quote, "While each of us has different views on the particulars of various economic policies, we believe overall Harris's economic agenda will improve our nation's health, investment, sustainability, resilience, employment opportunities, and fairness, and be vastly superior to the counterproductive economic agenda of Donald Trump," end quote.
Also in the letter, they wrote that former President Trump's economic plan, which includes high tariffs on imported goods and tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, will lead to, quote, "higher prices, larger deficits, and greater inequality," end quote. On the flip side, and back in June, 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists signed a letter warning of an inflation bomb caused by former President Trump's economic plans.
This letter was written when Joe Biden was still in the race. They wrote, quote, "During Joe Biden's presidency, we have also seen a remarkably strong and equitable labor market recovery, enabled by his pandemic stimulus," end quote. They warn Americans in this letter of Trump's, quote, "fiscally irresponsible budgets," end quote. Whichever economic plans are put into motion is up to the American people's choice in the voting booths.
We'll be right back.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Minnesota Governor and Democratic Vice Presidential candidate Tim Walz visited the Electric City last Friday. Walz held a Friday Night Lights rally at the Scranton Cultural Center. He stopped in Scranton after 2 other campaign stops in Philadelphia and Allentown before flying to Las Vegas. Key speakers at the rally included Scranton Mayor Paige Cognetti, PA Senator Marty Flynn, Teamster leader Bill Hamilton, and Susie Connors, wife of the late former mayor of Scranton, Jimmy Connors. Walz concluded the rally by shaking hands with voters before heading back on the campaign trail. With TVM News, this is Casey Jeanette.
What's your favorite short form series?
What? I don't know.
What's your favorite short form series?
I don't know. I don't have one.
Wrong. It's What's the Woodward on the Street.
Well, that's an easy question, because tonight I'll be watching The Woodward on the Street, my favorite bi-weekly series here at Marywood University. Can I have an example first?
Like, What's the Woodward on the Street, or What's the Woodward on the Street, or What's the Woodward on the Street?
What's the Woodward on the Street?
My favorite short form series is Randy Rambles. Oh, I mean Woodward on the Street.
What's the Woodward on the Street? By the Woodward.
What is your second favorite short form series?
Short form series? Who's writing on the Woodward YouTube channel?
Wrong. It's What's the Woodward on the Street again.
Okay, what's the Woodward on the Street?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Welcome back to TV-Marywood. This election is predicted to be an even tighter race than the 2020 election between President Biden and former President Trump. In 2020, Biden won 6 out of the 7 swing states, and some of those by only about 11,000 or 12,000 votes.
Over Trump. Really only through flipping swing states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania blue did he win. Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin were the closest, with Biden winning by around 11,000 in Arizona, around 12,000 in Georgia, and by 20,000 in Wisconsin. Nevada went to Biden by only 33,000 votes. Biden won in Pennsylvania by 88,000 votes, and in Michigan by 154,000 votes. Trump won in North Carolina, the last of the swing states, by 74,000 votes.
Per ABC News, 386,709 votes determined the outcome of the 2020 election in the battleground states out of a nationwide 158 million votes. Since July, when Biden dropped out of the race, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump have not been separated by more than 3 percentage points.
You'll be hearing much more about them tonight, so let's find out more about each candidate's background.
There are 4 main names on the ballot this year. Here's a history on their previous political experiences. Donald Trump, Republican.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Despite running for president in 2000 and 2012 before shortly dropping out, Donald Trump announced his presidential candidacy and became the frontrunner against Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. He lost the popular vote, however won the general election, becoming the only president to have neither served in the military nor had prior political experience before becoming president. After his 4-year term, Trump ran for re-election against Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Biden won the election, but Trump denied and continues to deny the outcome of the election today. Kamala Harris, Democrat. Before becoming the presidential nominee, Kamala Harris worked as the Deputy District Attorney of Alameda County, California from 1990 to 1998. And worked her way up to the DA's office. In 2011, Harris became Attorney General of California and served until 2017. She was elected U.S. Senator of California in 2017 and announced her candidacy for president in 2019. She ultimately withdrew from the race in December of that year. In 2020, Harris endorsed Biden and was later picked as Biden's running mate. In 2024, when Biden dropped out of his race for re-election, she was endorsed as the Democratic candidate and became the official Democratic nominee in August. From DA to AG to VP, Harris was the first woman and woman of color to hold each office. The same would apply if she is elected president. Jill Stein, Green Party. Jill Stein ran for president in affiliation with the Green Party in 2012 and 2016, and was once again officially selected as the Green Party's nominee in August 2024. Chase Oliver, Libertarian Party. Libertarian candidate Chase Oliver originally ran for Georgia's House seat. In 2022, he ran for the U.S. Senate. After losing that seat, he announced his presidential candidacy. With TVM News, this is Casey Jeanette.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
This election truly is shaping up to be quite different from 2020's, but let's get into the how and why with our panel.
All right, welcome back. So, Lindsay, we'll start with you. How is this election different from the last one in 2020?
Well, I would say that there's more, speaking for Democrats, right? Yeah. I would say that there's more fear surrounding this election, but to combat that, I think there's more excitement for the candidate that we have now, being Kamala. She has brought out emotion within the Democratic Party. She's making young people excited to vote. It's a lively young candidate, which we haven't seen in a while, arguably a while. So that's kind of, it's almost like turning the page, giving people a breath of fresh air with her running for the Democratic Party.
Yeah. All right. And then for Zach, on your side, how is this election different?
There are 3 major points, I'd say, for the Republican Party on this election. Firstly, mail-in ballots. Trump last time discouraged mail-in ballots. This time, it is an emphasis. The Republican Party has embraced them, I would say, wholeheartedly in comparison to 2020, because that really did bite him last time. COVID is not a variable. I've said for the last 4 years, I really believe it didn't matter who was president, even Jesus, he would have lost the election in 2020. Hillary Clinton, Trump, no matter who, because COVID was just a very bad time, and I think that would have been against anyone's record. And the third thing that really makes 2020, comparing, I guess, now against 2020, would be, in my opinion, Trump has already won the election once. He was against Joe Biden, and he dropped out. And I think that was a sign of weakness for the Democratic Party. And I think, again, yes, he's not president right now, but the other candidate had to drop out late in the race, is what we assume by modern standards, this July.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if we had more time, that would obviously be a deeper conversation that we can have. But we're going to move forward. And Lindsay, for the Harris campaign, how is the campaign planning a different administration than the one that Vice President Kamala Harris is in now?
Yeah, so with if she were to win this election, I think we would see more Republican influence in her administration. She's made it clear before that she's not just worried about her own party. She doesn't want just influence from Democrats. She wants to see another perspective. She wants to see Republican perspective. Does she want to see MAGA Republican perspective? Chances are no. Not many people do. But I think there's going to be more influence from moderate Republicans or conservatives even.
Yeah. As she says in many of her speeches that she plans to be a president for all Americans, and based on her policies, it does seem like she is the moderate candidate that's looking to reach across the aisle and actually get things done, and as she puts it, kick the tire and have that conversation of how we can best come up with solutions on both sides. So, moving forward, Zach, how is this campaign for Trump showing differences from his last administration?
I think one of the best things that he has going for him now, comparing to when he was coming off of his last administration, is definitely that we could look at the performance of Harris and Biden. People are able to ask themselves, am I doing better now in 2024 than I was in 2020? Or we'll even say 2019, if you want to say 2023 and 2019, just to have that fair comparison without COVID. And are you doing better? Are you doing worse? Even though he did not run against Kamala last time, I think it's important to realize with this election too that Kamala chose to run for re-election with Joe Biden. And a lot of times I feel like there's this removal with Kamala Harris from Joe Biden's policies, but she chose to go for re-election with him. And I think that that kind of shows that to some extent she was at least believing that he was doing something mostly right. So I think that Trump has that over her, even though it is not her that was president the last 4 years. She was the vice president, and she was running for re-election with Joe Biden this July. So that is definitely something that is a different component here that I was covering before with Trump already kind of beating Joe Biden this year.
Yeah, this election cycle has been unprecedented. Crazy. Yeah, it's nothing we've never seen before. We've never seen an incumbent drop out mid-election cycle and then endorse their vice president and then have this campaign evolve into what it is. And, you know, having social media and Gen Z play a huge role in how this campaign is evolving and how things are going for us right now. Which, again, goes to say, I get it. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired of the status quo in politics. Absolutely. And so I understand having an outsider, but at the same time, it's just interesting to see how this is evolving and how people are starting to view politics as more of a game of chess or like taking the bus. It's all strategy, and it's about getting to as close to where you want to be without it being a major inconvenience. It's about having that ability to reach across the aisle and use our voices through our votes. So, yeah.
And we've seen that, especially even through like Liz Cheney I would say the big one for the Democrats, and I would say for Trump, RFK. I mean, RFK is kind of taking all of those like third-party voters who, you know, one day might like Kamala, one day might like Trump, and that's another person. I mean, and former, you know, obviously big Democrat. I mean, JFK, the party of JFK. You know, so definitely both sides we have that tug and pull on who they want to work with.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how it's going to evolve. But we're going to check back in with Colby and Kyle to see what updates we have on the election coverage.
Thanks, Casey. Before we get into some of the updates from the states across the nation, from ABC News, this just in, looks like there are some technical issues in Burlington County in New Jersey. As a result, they have extended polling hours to 9 p.m. instead of the usual 8. Hopefully they get things resolved there soon. But now for the updates, looks like Maryland is trending, according to NBC's predictions, looks like it's trending for Harris, which would give her 10 electoral votes. Looks like Trump still is looking at taking Tennessee with 11 electoral votes. Also looking a Trump prediction for Oklahoma. Kamala Harris is looking to win Massachusetts. Looks like Donald Trump is projected to win Florida so far. Of course, this is all very early on in the forecast. But some other news events we have going on. It looks like Sarah McBride may become the first transgender person to serve in Congress. So we're looking to perhaps see some history being made tonight. We'll find out a little bit later. And some news on the home front. Looks like Senate incumbent Bob Casey is currently winning his Senate seat against Dave McCormick. Back to you, Colby.
This is the first election many Marywood students are able to vote. Here's how they feel about the importance of making their voice heard.
How does voting make a difference?
Well, it's something you can actually impact your life by doing, not just the general election, but local elections as well.
Voting makes a difference, especially if you're in a swing state, because it can determine who wins and who loses. On a more local level, it affects wherever you live.
Our president is going to be in office because of us, who we vote for, so it's important to vote.
Whatever you want to happen, that's a change that you can vote for.
Voting makes a difference just because it's in the numbers. That's, if to get the things that we want, we need to get out there and vote for the things that are important to us. So it's all in the numbers. We got to push for what we want and what we need.
Voting, oh my God. This question, guys, voting makes a total difference. Please don't think that just because I'm not voting, like my vote doesn't matter. It definitely matters. So please vote. Please make a difference. Please care. Voting is very important because we get to have the opportunity to change something that, it's very important nowadays. For example, our healthcare. We get to choose the candidates who represent us, and you should care. Definitely you should care, because not only does it represent our country, it represents the people.
We'll be back after these short messages.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Mandegraw to take the inbound. Finds Franco to Sites. 3-ball on the way. Bingo! Huge 3 by Trevor Sites to tie the ball game! Sent to him. He finds Franco. Backdoor pass. Bousman with the jam! Austin Bousman! The backdoor cut setup! Driving to the cup, Mandegraw, tough play, able to spin it home, and one again!
Ladies and gentlemen, we have some breaking news. A brand new season of Who's Reddit is officially out. Join Felix Latini as he interviews members of the Woodward staff. Heard that guy's pretty cool. Anyway, to find the new season and more, go to the Woodward YouTube page. Really? A new season? That's it? That was the breaking news? Nothing else? Must be a slow day. Go to commercial.
Marywood's theater program just finished their recent production of Mad Forest by Carol Churchill and has high hopes for the spring musical. This year's spring performance is Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812. The show will be held in February of 2025. For more information, visit marywood.edu or follow the Marywood Players on Instagram.
Welcome back to TV-Marywood. For the last few days, the presidential candidates spent time in key battleground states in an attempt to rally voters for their respective campaigns. For their final messages, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump gave two vastly different speeches.
In Reading, Pennsylvania yesterday, Donald Trump spoke to supporters primarily about the economy and immigration. This was meant to assure his voters that he believes he has an edge over Kamala Harris on these issues. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, yesterday, Kamala Harris spoke to voters about what she's promising the country if elected. Harris said, quote, "As president, I pledge to seek common ground and common sense solutions to the challenges you face," end quote. With both candidates spending their last day campaigning in Pennsylvania, we are again reminded of just how important Pennsylvania is in this election.
As the fifth most populated state in the country of almost 13 million people, and the near even political split in that population, Pennsylvania could potentially be the deciding state in this election. Here's how. If each candidate wins where they are already favored, Trump has to win one of the northern swing states, either Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, and Harris has to win one out of Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Georgia.
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes, the most of the 7 battleground states. Interestingly, since 1948, no Democrat has won the presidency without winning Pennsylvania. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, both candidates focused on issues like the economy, crime, abortion, and immigration.
While we are mainly discussing the Democratic and Republican nominees running for president, there are other names on the ballots in that race. Under independent and third party are Cornel West, Jill Stein, Chase Oliver, and Claudia Dela Cruz. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was among the list of candidates but dropped out at the end of August. Let's take a look at RFK Jr.'s impact on this election with Marywood student Felix Latini.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s history in this year's election has been all over the place and a little bit confusing. Before we mention his impact, we have to learn a little bit about him first. He is a part of the Kennedy family, which has a deep connection in politics. His father, Robert Kennedy, was a former attorney general and ran for president back in 1968. His uncle, John F. Kennedy, won the 1960 election and became president. For RFK Jr., he became an environmental lawyer and worked in children's health. He's the founder of the Waterkeeper Alliance. He also founded the Children's Health Defense. Now that you know a little bit about his past, let's talk about his part in this year's election. RFK Jr. began his political campaign in the spring of 2023. He first ran as a Democrat, following in the footsteps of his father and uncle. However, in the fall of 2023, he changed to independent. This decision provided Kennedy with many hardships. His team struggled with money, getting his name on ballots, and getting him on the debate stage. In August of 2024, RFK Jr. decided to suspend his presidential campaign and endorse Donald Trump. He plans to be a part of Trump's team if he wins, working on health and environmental issues. He has accompanied Trump during his rallies and used the slogan, "Make America Healthy Again." Trump is happy to have RFK on his side and plans for him to do whatever it takes to fix these issues.
Having him is such a great honor. I've been friends of his for a long time, and I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines.
Despite suspending his election campaign, RFK Jr.'s name is still appearing on ballots. Many of the state's ballots have removed his name, but some remain listed. According to CNN, the swing states Michigan and Wisconsin still include his name. Although RFK Jr. has stepped away from running for president, he still has a big impact on this year's election. For TVM News, I'm Felix Latini.
Let's check back in with our panel.
Vice President Harris has the endorsement of former President Barack Obama, while former President Trump has the endorsement of RFK Jr., who was running for president until he dropped out. How did these specific political figures' endorsements make a difference in their campaigns? Lindsay, let's start with you.
Yeah, so former President Barack Obama, lots of people love him, right? Especially Democrats.
Yeah.
Him, not just even him, Michelle Obama too. Arguably, Democrats, especially women, they when it comes to Michelle Obama, they would ignore Barack Obama to get to her. And she has the support of both of them, which is major for her campaign because people love and trust them. They trust their opinion, they trust what they have to say. Lots of people liked Obama's presidency. So they're going to trust his judgment in saying that he is endorsing Harris.
And how about for Trump?
I would make the case that Obama does less for Harris than RFK does for Trump. As I was saying before, RFK is this Democratic figure who has obviously his father and his uncle as his forebearers, and then was his third-party candidate who did pick up a lot of steam. I would say probably one of the bigger, if not biggest, third-party candidates of our time. As Lindsay said, lots of people like Obama, and Democrats, we're saying, not that I hate them, but what I'm getting at here is the fact that the people who love Obama, we're going to love Kamala Harris, probably, or Joe Biden, or anyone else, no matter what. So I feel like the reach that Trump is getting with RFK is more substantial than Obama with, let's say, the average Kamala supporter.
So you two both bring interesting points, which will bring us to our next part. So we're going to take a look at the differences between this year's election and 2020's election with Emily Rowe.
We are going to head back to 2020 to discuss some of these differences. In 2020, COVID was a big issue among the candidates. In 2024, we now have a vaccine to combat against COVID, while back then we didn't. That was a different time compared to now. Some may say a different world. In early 2020, COVID shut down schools and jobs across the globe. borders shut down, many people were staying home and only going out when needed. The world shut down. Many Americans thought we needed stricter guidelines, while others thought then President Donald Trump was doing a good job. According to CNN, Biden's COVID relief plan would offer free testing to Americans, as well as an increase in drive-through testing sites. It also called for hiring 100,000 people for national contact tracing. His plan also included steps designed to assist schools and businesses to reopen. These included financial support for rehiring and retaining workers and guaranteed paid leave for anyone that contracted coronavirus or anyone caring for someone with it. Biden also planned on mandating masks for everyone. Some other major policies of the 2020 election included the economy, healthcare, immigration, gun rights, climate change, education, police reform, and foreign relations. This election, abortion, immigration, and the economy are the biggest issues. Each candidate's view on these topics are what is influencing voters in this election. According to CNN, abortion is the top issue for 1 in 8 voters. Trump believes that abortion is up to the states. According to CNN, Trump has boasted that he played a central role in getting the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, which was established in 1973, guaranteeing abortion rights across the country. Harris plans on reinstating Roe v. Wade, which will allow women across the country to have abortion rights. On the issue of immigration, Trump, according to the Washington Post, plans to implement the largest mass deportation of undocumented immigrants in American history. According to the New York Times, he would round up undocumented immigrants in mass migrant camps and employ a speedier way to deport them known as expedited removal, though that could face legal challenges. If re-elected, he would also try to end DACA. In a town hall conducted by CNN in 2023, Trump indicated that he could reunite migrant-separated families. Trump said, quote, "When you say to a family that if you come, we're going to break you up, they don't come," end quote. According to the New York Times and Washington Post, Trump also plans on barring entry from Muslim-majority countries and plans on suspending the refugee program. Trump also has said he would restore his migrant protection protocols, known as the Remain in Mexico program, which required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico during their immigration proceedings, as well as try to divert would-be U.S. asylum seekers to a third country willing to accept them. While Harris wanted to sign into law a tough border compromise that would have closed loopholes in the asylum process, given the president greater authority to shut down the border when crossings are high and limited parole of migrants, which allows them to temporarily enter the United States. For the economy, Trump wants to put a 10% tax on all imported goods coming into the United States and 60% on any goods from China. Trump has promised to protect Social Security and Medicare, but Trump has opposed widespread student loan debt cancellation. While Harris wants to strengthen Social Security and Medicare, she also backs the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness plan for tens of millions of borrowers. According to CNN, early voting has gone down significantly since the 2020 election. In 2020, early voting made 30% of the 158 million votes. Back in 2020, more people were voting either by mail or in-person early voting. Many were afraid of the large crowds of Election Day and being exposed to COVID. Many went in early to avoid the large crowds while making sure their vote counted, while others voted through a mail-in ballot in the safety of their own home. The reason for people voting early also changed. Back then, it was to protect their health, while now they do it to make sure they can find the time to vote. Many have found this way easier to vote because many end up not voting because the day simply gets away from them or due to their conflicts. In the previous election, Joe Biden was the Democratic nominee, while Donald Trump was the Republican nominee. In this election, Joe Biden was originally the Democratic nominee, but due to concerns about his age and poor debate performance, he stepped down and Kamala Harris at the Democratic convention received the Democratic nomination for president, while Donald Trump remained the Republican nominee for president. According to CNN, Biden's endorsement of Harris helped make her the consensus nominee despite the fact that she did not take part in any primaries. No Democrats rose to challenge her at the convention in August. Even though these two elections happened 4 years apart, we still face similar issues that we had 4 years ago, and for most, the same anxiety while awaiting the next president of the United States.
We'll be right back.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Marywood's Chamber Singers is a small, select ensemble of Marywood students that performs mostly a cappella repertoire. This group, filled with passionate musicians, performs multiple times throughout the year. Members must pass an audition to join, but students of any major are welcome. The Chamber Singers' next performance will be held on November 24th at 2 p.m. in the Marian Chapel on campus. The ensemble will also make an appearance at the inauguration of Marywood's 13th president, Lisa Laurie. The Chamber Singers will also head to California this May for their annual tour. For more information, visit marywood.edu.
Early voters broke turnout records this year. In PA, many people were able to vote early via mail-in ballots, like TVM's own Mary Pegarilla, who voted absentee for New York State. While the request deadline for mail-in ballots was October 29th, those who received one have until 8 p.m. on November 5th to get their ballots to their county election office. Those with ballots who change their mind about voting by mail may surrender that ballot at their polling place in order to vote in person. Polls in PA are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day. With TVM News, this is Casey Jeanette.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Welcome back to TV-Marywood's 2024 election coverage. This election brought Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Ohio Junior Senator J.D. Vance into the race.
Tim Walz is the Democratic vice presidential hopeful. Walz enlisted in the Army National Guard as a 17-year-old and served for 24 years. Throughout that time, he rose to the rank of Command Sergeant Major. After his service, he went to college and became an educator and football coach, something the Harris campaign has been mentioning a lot with their stances on education. Walz then became a member of Congress in a Republican district before becoming the governor of Minnesota. As governor, Walz has protected women's rights to choose, lowered the cost of insulin to $35 per month, and cut taxes for working families.
J.D. Vance, or James David Vance, is the Republican vice presidential hopeful. Vance enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 2005 and served in the Iraq War. After his service, he graduated from Ohio State University and Yale Law School. After graduating, he spent some time as a practicing corporate lawyer before making his way into the tech industry to be a venture capitalist. He became a senator representing Ohio in 2023. As senator, Vance made 45 speeches, sponsored 57 legislative bills, and co-sponsored 288 bills. Let's talk to our panelists about their vice presidential picks.
So what has your candidate's running mate added to their campaign? Zach, we'll start with you, with J.D. Vance.
I think it's somewhat of a fresh start. J.D. Vance is very young, as we were just told. He was a Ohio senator beginning in 2023, so again, kind of fresh to the political scene for sure. Compared to Donald Trump, he's a lot younger. I think that he also provides maybe a stepping point to the future. As I said, maybe because he is so young, that will entice more people to vote for the Trump campaign. Obviously, when we were first starting off, it was Joe Biden and Trump. They were both, higher in age. Kamala Harris is a bit younger. But I think that having a younger vice president does help Trump's edge. And then, again, he's very vibrant. And the future of the Republican Party has to go somewhere. I mean, the one thing that at least I'll be critical for Trump is that during his debates, even within the Republican Party, like he kind of I was kind of concerned of who would be vice president. You have this debate and then he wins. Well, who are you going to pick out of all that?
And I do have a question about Pence and him not having him back on as his running mate. What's your stance on that?
Why do I think he didn't? Well, or
I guess not necessarily why, but it could be why, but it could also be, how do you feel about, what went down and why he chose someone else?
Yeah, I think many Americans would rather there wouldn't be such a discontent between maybe Donald Trump and Mike Pence or over what happened on January 6th. definitely not one of Trump's highlights. But again, I think also, you know, everyone has their political views. He was with Trump for 4 years, and he doesn't agree with them. You know, that's okay. I mean, there are people who are with Joe Biden, I'm sure, who don't agree with him either, or Kamala Harris. So I think that just because Mike Pence is not in the race does not signify Trump can't be president. But, you know, Mike Pence is kind of retracted, I would say, mostly from political life at this point. So.
All right. And Lindsay, how about Governor Walz?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say that I think that Pence dislikes Trump not because he doesn't agree with him. I think it's because Trump almost got him killed by a riot on the Capitol. But, and also Vance, I wouldn't say he was a good vice presidential pick. Even though he is young, he is intelligent. There should have been more background on him. He's said so many comments about Trump, disagreeing with Trump, and then switching, and then now he loves Trump and will do anything for Trump, and then childless cat ladies were the worst, and all this, that was just, for me, not a good pick on Trump's part. He could have found someone better that probably could have appealed to more independent voters, which is just a strategic pick. Anyways, Walt, Democrats really like him. He's relatable. He's a sense of familiarity to people that you would meet in your own community. You know, he coached football, public servant, National Guard. He did all these things. He has a great personality. He kind of just reminds you of a father figure, because obviously he is a father. So Democrats really like that pick. He's bringing more life to her campaign. He's older, but not so old, right? That was just overall a good pick for the Democrats and the campaign.
Yeah. And just bouncing off of what Colby and Zach said earlier about education, what do you think his role is as an educator in his position as vice presidential hopeful?
Yeah. So obviously he was a public school teacher. He knows how to, I want to say, explain things in a way that people will understand, especially, again, I mentioned that before, fear surrounding this election, women's right to choose, stuff like that. He makes people feel a sense of security, how he explains things, and that probably could be taken from his time teaching. Obviously, he's dealing with kids, dealing with young adults. Young adults are the main people afraid in this election because these problems are obviously going to affect them. So that's how I would relate his time as a teacher to how he is acting during this campaign.
Yeah. And following up with that, in terms of the campaign as a whole, what is the priority of education in both parties? We'll start with you.
I was going to say, obviously, there's the talk of defunding or taking apart the Department of Education at the national level and just leaving it up to the states. And I think that's a very interesting idea, being an educator, just because we look at our great country. There are many states with different education plans even in place with the federal government still being involved and the national government. And if you look at like a state like Alabama, for example, we would probably say maybe the education there is different from Pennsylvania, even though the government has full control over it. And I think a lot of people are attacking Trump in regards to education because he wants to give it back to the states. But I feel like at this point we already have vast and different diverse types of education across the United States. So I think that's something that would definitely cut costs, and it would return a lot of money to each state government for their Department of Education, which I think would, help us get rid of the bureaucratic, waste of money that's going on in Washington. So I think that that's not the worst idea when it comes to education. I know that's something Trump definitely is looking to do.
Lindsay, rebuttal?
I honestly don't have anything to rebuttal for that. I don't hate, well, obviously, you know what, let me pause. I don't think the Department of Education should be defunded at all. And he also mentioned, obviously that's not the only thing that he talked about with his policy. I don't want to get so off topic, so maybe I'll save that for later.
I have something I'd like to go back, if I could, just a little bit about, you mentioned J.D. Vance disliking Trump and making comments. And the thing I would say, though, think of Lincoln, the party of Lincoln. Lincoln had people in his cabinet that he didn't agree with. And I think that's a good thing. Even we're saying before about Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has some Republicans, or you think that she would have Republicans in her cabinet or in, cahoots, if you wish, with her. I don't think having people who disagree with you is a bad thing. I think that shows strength and shows that you're willing to see the other side.
But J.D. Vance couldn't say that Trump lost the 2020 election, which is kind of like that honestly was his worst moment in the debate. But he can't even say that he lost the election just probably because it would hurt Trump's feelings, which is where lots of Democrats get worried about J.D. Vance because say Trump tries to do something like that again or something worse. Is he going to be the person to tell him you're wrong?
Well, Mike Pence did it.
And then where'd that get him?
Well, they were both out of the White House. I mean, it doesn't change anything. I mean,
they got him locked in a tunnel.
I don't know, a tunnel. I think that's a little dark, I'd say.
It was a tunnel, the underground tunnel. While protesters were fighting with police.
We're not going to agree on this. So we're not going to go down that path. That's 4 years ago at this point.
All right. Well, that brings us to the perfect point to throw it back to where we were before. So we're going to check out the latest on the electoral map. Kyle, over to you.
Thanks, Casey. We do have some updates to the electoral map thanks to our predictions from NBC News. Looks like about 16 states have been called or predicted to be called for the Republican ticket, while 9 Democratic states have been predicted. Not a whole lot of shockers in this category. Democratic strongholds like New York and Vermont have been called for Harris, and Republican strongholds North Dakota, Wyoming, and Louisiana have been called for Donald Trump. We have, while we're waiting for the results here at Marywood University, it looks like Kamala Harris is hosting an election night watch party at Howard University in Washington, D.C., while Donald Trump is watching the election results at his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida. Whereas not everybody is happy watching the results tonight. It looks like there are reports of pro-Palestinian protests outside the White House as we speak. Looks like there are signs reading "No Justice, No Peace" and "No Trump, No Kamala." Well, the president is going to be either one of those. It will certainly not be Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who will certainly not win, though he is currently racked up 3,500 votes, which means he has about 1% of the national vote. So safe to say he will not be our next president. Of course, this is unlike some historical fun facts for you. Our fourth president, James Madison, the shortest ever to be president, he easily won his re-election in 1820. Of course, for a man of 5'4" stature and who weighed less than 100 pounds, I assume his only opposition would be a gust of wind. Back to you, Colby.
Well, he was shorter than me, so we'll be back after these short messages.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
They perform under the bright lights on the field, court, and track. When they aren't wearing the Marywood colors across their chest, they're the smiling faces in the classroom. But there's so much more to these Pacers. During this season of the Student Athlete Spotlight, we sit down with 4 Marywood Pacers athletes. Josephine Source, the all-time assist leader for the women's soccer team. Lainey Straub, a 3-sport athlete who returned to Marywood after a short stint at Kent State. Jack Baronski, a multi-time Marywood Male Athlete of the Year. And Zoe Badner, the women's cross-country captain who spends a good share of her time on the slopes. Catch this season of the Student Athlete Spotlight, presented by the Woodward.
Hey man,
How are you?
Good.
How you
Good to
been?
see you.
Busy. How
Yeah.
about yourself?
Oh, busy as well, man. I'm enjoying this Woodward coffee, the election, man. I can't believe it's coming up.
Hey, boys.
Oh, hey.
How are you?
What's
How
going
about
on?
this Woodward coffee?
Well, I was just telling him about the Woodward coffee. Yeah.
How about that election? It's almost here. It's almost here.
We were just talking about it, man. It's going by so fast. It's like, man.
Yeah, I really do think Reagan's going to beat Carter.
Huh? Wait, say it again?
You know, I actually like Lincoln as a president. I don't know why the South's getting so upset.
What? Lincoln? Lincoln's not alive, Randy.
You know, I have my reservations about Washington as the president, but considering how good he did in the Revolution, I think he's a good choice.
Are you talking about George? What are you talking about?
I really do think we should leave the British Empire. They kind of suck.
Have you been,
like, time traveling or
something? Are you all right?
2024. How about that stock market crash? That was crazy.
Don't be like Randy. Stay informed. Keep up to date on election coverage.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Welcome back to TV-Marywood. Let's check back in with our panel.
We've got an upcoming interview with an associate professor here at Marywood, and something coming up in that conversation is the importance of checking your sources and having reliable information. Let's discuss where our two panelists get their information from on a regular basis, how much they trust their preferred sources, and whether they expand their horizons in terms of what they're researching. Zach, let's start with you.
I would say anyone in our generation, really do see a lot on social media. I think that's obvious. You got to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of those things, there are good and bad sources. I would say on a flat surface, things that I seek out myself. I am a bit of an oldie. I will sometimes read the paper in my hand. The ABC local affiliate, WNEP, which I think kind of gives more of an even Steven, more so than most. Maybe not so for your opinion, but Ben Shapiro, I think he's pretty firm. I like to listen to his podcast every day. So besides that, once in a blue moon, I will venture off into Fox, CNN, MSNBC. But I mean, no matter who you get, there's bias to some extent there, and it's just not as much my cup of tea.
And Lindsay, how about you?
I agree with the bias everywhere. Surprisingly enough, sometimes I do watch Ben Shapiro.
Really?
Yeah.
I like him. Kick around.
Yeah, but I'm the same with you. I will find my information on social media, whether that be TikTok, sometimes Twitter, like a good amount Twitter. Are you on Twitter? No?
I'm on Twitter, but it's not. No, I don't really.
TikTok?
TikTok, yeah. I mean, I think the thing with TikTok is it's like anyone can make a video. It's just like Wikipedia. Yeah. So I mean, I think social media works more so as, and I'm saying like when you're seeing like videos or reels, those videos are more like just inspiring you to understand what's going on, to find out what's going on. You're not like you should not be using TikTok as your main, form of media. Yeah. On Facebook, I mean, if there's an article by the New York Times or the Washington Post, I mean that's a little different, but like reels by Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
No.
So that brings me to my next point is, what do you think the influence is of AI and misinformation in terms of getting these sources for news from social media and other sources?
I think that AI, I don't even want to go into AI because that's like its own thing, but misinformation, and it's not just like a one party thing. It's both parties. Democrats, Republicans. There are people that will purposely post misinformation to make one side or the other look bad. Every politician, like every party, every legislative problem, there's always going to be misinformation. I think our generation does a better job at knowing misinformation when we see it, but you get the older generations, like our parents, I hate to say, the grandparents, they can't tell you the difference. So sometimes you'll get like a message from your mom or dad, and they'll be like, "Have you seen this?" And it's just like the most crazy thing you've ever seen.
It's like one of those like flatbed trucks with 1,000 American flags on it. I think, did you know that Trump actually sent this out on I-81 today? I'm like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, and AI videos even of candidates saying something, or like or destroying ballots.
Yeah,
right, that could be dangerous.
One of the things I just thought of that we did not touch on just now is and maybe we don't like getting it this way, the text messages and the phone calls. I mean, if I ever ran for president, my first thing would be that they are banned. Like all of those calls, I've gotten probably 25 text messages a day, and that's on the minimum.
Yeah, I got woken up maybe 3 times in the past week.
I had my phone off yesterday for a half hour. 4. I mean, and again, like ironically, those are probably by AI. I don't think someone's just sending those. And it's funny, even my roommate will get like texts right after each other, the same ones. Like, I don't know what they're doing, but.
Well, I will say from a campaigning perspective is that a lot of times they will recruit volunteers to use text banking services. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's AI. Maybe there could be an influence there, but most of the time there is a real person behind the scenes clicking send on those.
Poorly written then.
Anyway, we are going to move on to our next topic. Colby and Kyle, we will bring it over to you.
Thanks, Casey. Marywood student Vincent Goldschmidt sat down with Marywood history professor Dr. Adam Sprinston to hear his thoughts on the power of student voting.
Do you think student voting is increasing or decreasing, and why? That's a fantastic question. I think that there's a lot of interest and a lot of enthusiasm in the run-up to this election. My sense in interacting with students is that we have a good number of new first-time voters who will be voting in this election, which you would expect in a presidential election anyway. But I think that there is a sense among students that this is a bit of an inflection point in this election, that there's a need to be involved and to have their vote counted.
Why is it important for younger voters or younger citizens to vote, especially college students?
For college students in particular, you all have sort of the power to shape what the trajectory of our next immediate future looks like. People in that age bracket of the traditional undergraduates, 18 to 22 or so, tend to have the lowest levels of participation in voting in elections across the board. This has always been the case. It was the same when I was an undergrad. It's always just been the case. So we often focus in on the idea that we are slow to change in terms of our politics, in terms of maybe important social issues or political issues that we all hold dear. Politicians want to answer to their constituents and they want to remain in power. It's their job. So they're going to answer to the people who are most involved. If we saw a small increase in the level of participation amongst people in that age from 18 to 22, I think we would see a fairly significant amount of social change occurring because politicians would have to answer towards that age bracket. So college students have a really important role in Pennsylvania in particular in terms of thinking about where the state's going to go in this election. But I'd say also, even beyond this election, that it's really important to vote in the presidential elections, but it's also really important to vote in the off-year elections for members of Congress, for your representatives in the state legislature, and all the elections that are to come.
If you do, how do you influence your students to go and vote when you're in class?
I think that one of the things that I've noticed over time is that voting feels like a very mysterious process to a lot of students. And I think I probably was the same when I was 18 and I first registered to vote. So being able to talk through the process of what it takes to become a registered voter, how simple it is, how easy it is to do that in Pennsylvania. You can do it online now. It takes maybe 30 seconds. To inform students that even if they're in Pennsylvania from another state and they want to change their polling place in Pennsylvania, as long as they've been established here for a month and they can vote in our elections, as long as they have permanent residency during the year. That students have the option of getting mail-in ballots, that students have the options of early voting in Pennsylvania, giving them a sense of deadlines, and also making sure that I give them a link on Brightspace to be able to go to register to vote.
With social media being as prominent as it is, how do you, and then also helping your students, how do you try to find the sources that are reliable and aren't fake news or biased?
In so many ways, this immediate aftermath of this election, no matter where it goes, the social response is going to be dictated by the information that's going to start to spread online on election night and beyond. So it's fundamentally important that everybody, and everybody has fallen short on this at some point, that everybody ensures that their sources of information are verifiable. Look at the sources. Just because the name of an organization sounds legitimate doesn't mean that an organization is legitimate. Investigate what their bias possibly might be or what their motivation might be for the information that they're spreading. Don't take information at face value. If there's one thing that being a historian helps me do, and I'm imperfect at this because everybody's imperfect, but it does help me do, is to take the step back to try to question motivations when information is being sent my way. Methods, what's the rhetoric being used? Is it to try to play upon my emotions rather than my logic? And to be able to take a critical eye towards all sources that we look at, whether they're ones that we agree with or not, to be able to come to our best conclusions as individuals rather than rely upon information that's meant to inflame us, agitate us, or play with our emotions.
And with Marywood being a very diverse community, what do you think is a good way to share an opinion, especially if your views are differing?
Well, I think it's certainly important to be able to talk about politics with people, even people that you disagree with, and be able to have respectful exchanges. Fundamentally, it's really important also for people to be able to respect that a lot of the issues at hand in this election and beyond target our most vulnerable communities. And in a time when rhetoric is particularly inflamed and rhetoric is particularly intense, that there's a reason that some of our students from underrepresented communities may be on guard and may be particularly nervous. I was watching the World Series last night and seeing some of the political ads that popped up during the World Series that are targeting minority communities and targeting really easily exploitable communities. So as much as we need to be able to have respectful exchanges, it's also important to note that we have communities whose safety and ability to live freely are very much up for grabs in this election, and we need to be cognizant of that as well.
As previously stated, it is incredibly important to fact-check the information you are taking in, and is especially important during an election year.
In a research report published by the Pew Research Center in July of this year, they found that most Americans do follow their local government and politics, but only about 25% of them are highly satisfied with the quality of the coverage. When Americans get their local news, their most frequent source is friends, family, and neighbors with 70%. At 66%, actual news outlets come in second. Unsurprisingly, Americans are more interested in national politics than local politics. Democrats and Republicans both seem to watch and trust different news broadcasts. In a survey done by YouGov.com, Democrats seem to watch and trust broadcasts such as CNN and MSNBC. Republicans seem to have less trust in the news than the Democrats and mainly trust Fox, Fox Business, and Newsmax.
Something interesting from this survey is that both Democrats and Republicans deem the National Enquirer, InfoWars, and the Daily Caller as more untrustworthy.
When we come back, we'll be breaking down some pivotal moments in this election.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
You there, skinny guy with the glasses.
So Randy, your character Skin Graft, like is that closely related to you? Like I thought you just got arrested yesterday.
Well, Skin Graft was, I just thought, you know, what's going to be funny? An old prospector showing up out of nowhere. And I had another guy plan to play him, but things fell through there, so I had to take up the mantle. Yeah, you with the mustache.
What were some of the behind the scenes of the production and what that atmosphere was like?
So the atmosphere was pretty chill. We had, we had the crew there, the actors. It was pretty good. Got it knocked out in about 3 hours. No real complaints, honestly. It was pretty good, pretty good. You back there with the fashionable hat.
Who is Don Cheadle?
I hope everybody gets to enjoy it. I'm glad you guys seem to have liked it. And I hope you enjoy it when it airs. How was that?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have some breaking news. A brand new season of Who's Reddit is officially out. Join Felix Latini as he interviews members of the Woodward staff. Heard that guy's pretty cool. Anyway, to find the new season and more, go to the Woodward YouTube page. Really? A new season? That's it? That was the breaking news? Nothing else? Must be a slow day. Go to commercial.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.
Welcome back to the broadcast of the 2024 presidential election. Since this is one of the most polarizing elections in recent history, let's talk about the closest elections in United States history.
In 1960, John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon battled for the presidency. The race saw both candidates tied at 47%. JFK won the popular vote by just under 120,000 out of 68.8 million votes and received 303 electoral votes, while Nixon had 219.
In 2000, George W. Bush and Al Gore competed in arguably the most contentious election in American history. There were many inconsistencies with ballot counting, especially in Florida, where Al Gore demanded a recount. Bush won in the Electoral College in the electoral vote with 271 and lost the popular vote by about 500,000. Back in 1876, Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democratic Samuel J. Tilden were involved in a tough election with a lot of surrounding hostility. The election was called in the House of Representatives when the completion of the vote count was forced in March of 1877. Hayes lost the popular vote by about 250,000, yet won the electoral vote by one single vote.
No two presidential races are ever the same. TV-Marywood's Casey Jeanette breaks down some of the most notable events from this election cycle.
This year's election campaign has differed from previous years. From candidates dropping out to assassination attempts, here's a rundown of everything that happened this year. The primary elections began in January, and each winner showed a repeat of the 2020 election, with the previous president Donald Trump as the Republican nominee and current President Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee. On June 27, 2024, Trump and Biden had their first and last campaign debate. After the election, Democrats called for Biden to drop out of the race, claiming that he was not in right sound of mind to continue for 4 years. On July 13th, Donald Trump held a rally in Butler, PA, where he was shot in the ear. One bystander and the shooter were killed. On July 15th, Donald Trump officially announces previous Ohio United States Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate. Vance originally opposed Trump when he ran in 2016, but has become a strong supporter since. July 21st, Joe Biden drops out of the presidential race. In a letter posted on social media platforms, Biden states, "And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to solely focus on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Shortly after, Biden endorses Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. On August 5th, Harris is nominated as the Democratic nominee at the Democratic National Convention. The next day, Harris announced Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. On September 10th, the second campaign debate and the first between Trump and Harris was held, hosted by ABC. On September 15th, there was another assassination attempt towards Donald Trump at the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, Florida. Trump was not injured and was escorted by the Secret Service. On October 1st, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz held their first and final vice presidential debate. With TVM News, this is Casey Jeanette.
Some voters are protest voting for third-party candidates or not voting at all because of Palestine. While their concerns are valid, do you believe their claims that both parties are the same is creating more harm toward Palestinians, especially comparing Harris's condemnation of unjust Palestinian suffering versus Trump's, quote, "finish the job," end quote? Would you like to start, Lindsay?
Sure. So I wouldn't directly say that their protests against the parties are causing more direct harm to the Palestinian people. What I will say, though, is in the perspective of me, a Democrat, I'm going to single out Jill Stein here, being on the ballot in, I think, every state. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. I think it's every state.
No, it's
if not most.
state.
Yeah. She's, again, as a Democrat, she's taking away votes from Kamala. And that is doing more harm for me than good, because obviously Democrats, I believe in Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris's plans for dealing with the Israel-Palestinian war, and Jill Stein being there and people voting for her as a protest of both candidates. Obviously, she's not going to win the election. I don't want to say they're wasting a vote because their opinion matters. But it's not going towards
the general election endpoint.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the candidates who have a chance to win.
Zach, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I would say I agree on some of your points. I do believe, again, not that it's a throwaway vote, but at the end of the day, we are in a system right now in the United States. I'm not saying it's a bad system. I think it's a great system. We have a two-party system, and that is just what it is. I will say RFK, just to balance off here a little bit, RFK, he had a pretty big, decent following, and I think if he would have stayed in, I don't think he would have won, but I think that would have been the biggest third-party turnout of our, recent years.
Like since Nader?
Yeah, I would say so. I just feel like he actually had momentum. I feel like in my lifetime, I don't think I've really seen anything, at least as long as I've been following the last couple election cycles. In regards to Palestine, I think the problem is there has been some inconsistency, I would say, amongst the Democratic Party, I should say, excuse me, and I've seen ads that kind of seem to be pivoting more towards Palestine or more towards Israel, depending on where you live, like Pennsylvania or Michigan, because Michigan has a high Islam population, and I think that that's where people might feel a little betrayed by Kamala. I don't think anyone expected Trump to,
Yeah.
So I think they were kind of looking for a refuge through Harris, and they didn't find it, or some feel like they didn't find it, and that was too big of an issue to give up. So now that's why we're seeing Jill kind of, rising in the ranks. Not enough to, make a big impact. But.
How do you think that the United States allyship with Israel affects this issue?
Well, it kind of draws a line in the sand where some people want one party to take up the pro and one to take the anti-Israel, but it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are I know people who are Jewish who are, let's say, not against Israel, but next say not against Palestine. It's not a black and white issue. That's the problem with most of our issues. We talk about abortion, the border, the economy. These are not things that are like, oh yes, he is completely right, she is completely wrong. There might be a side point that at least on my side, that I think that she might be right. You might find something like, oh, I can agree with Donald Trump on that. Small side point. Mm-hmm. I think that's the issue. It's like we're looking for people to be 100% on whatever we believe, but that's not going to happen unless you're just following someone with,
having a willingness to explore the gray area.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah. Well, I think that conflict with Israel and Palestine, it's so complicated. Obviously, I think, as a Democrat, the United States could do more, and other countries could do more to help the Palestinian people, humanitarian aid. There is too much civilian killing happening. Everyone could agree on that. Everyone with a heart could agree with that. But can the United States get Israel to stop doing what they're doing?
Same as Ukraine.
Yeah.
Ukraine, 2 years ago, if this election was 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we'd be talking about Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
Ukraine has fallen on the down low because it's not the, I don't want to say popular thing, but Israel-Palestine was last year. Ukraine was, before a year, I think a year prior, roughly. So, that's the problem. Or even Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the beginning of the Joe Biden presidency. So, I think all of these issues, there's not a black and white.
Yeah. And we're just college students. Like, things like this, or dealing with the United States dealing with Israel, it's more complicated than what we college students could understand at this point in our...
Yeah. And just kind of going off... Oh, we're out of time here. So we're going to bring it back over to Kyle and Colby, and we will check back in soon.
What do Elon Musk, Taylor Swift, and Hulk Hogan have in common? They have all endorsed one of the two major presidential candidates. Let's take a look at some of the major celebrity endorsements that have come out of this race.
Over the course of campaigning for the election, both Democratic nominee Vice President Kamala Harris and Republican nominee former President Donald Trump have received numerous celebrity endorsements. On the Republican side, the former president has received 46 celebrity endorsements. Out of all of them, arguably the most impactful endorsement has been that of Elon Musk, who is one of the richest men in the world, with a net worth of over $270 billion. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who until August 23rd was an independent candidate, dropped out of the race and endorsed Trump. Rappers like 50 Cent, Kanye West, Kodak Black, and Lil Pump have all endorsed Trump. In the wrestling and combat sports realm, both former WWE personality Hulk Hogan and Dana White, the CEO of UFC, have endorsed Trump. On the Democratic side, Vice President Harris has received over 80 endorsements from various celebrities. Out of all of these, arguably the most impactful endorsement came from singer Taylor Swift, who boasts 283 million Instagram followers. Other recording artists who have endorsed Harris include Olivia Rodrigo, John Legend, Billie Eilish, and Bruce Springsteen. Actors including George Clooney, Mark Hamill, Matt Damon, Jennifer Lawrence, and John Stamos have endorsed Harris as well. Another significant Harris endorsement came from Mark Cuban, the billionaire businessman and media personality who is well known for being a panelist on the television show Shark Tank and for being the former owner of the NBA's Dallas Mavericks. Additionally, former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle have endorsed Harris as well.
How long ago was
Right now, we're going to talk about the importance of voting.
What did you think? Why is it important for young individuals to vote, specifically college students?
I think it's especially important for college-age students to vote because their voices aren't usually heard financially by donations. They can't afford to do that. So, campaigns run on the finances, and then really what makes the impact is your vote. So go out, use your vote.
Voting is important, especially for young people, because it's going to affect us for the next 4 years. the laws that are being created will affect us with like the healthcare system, education, taxes.
I mean, we need a president, right? So make a decision. That's really it. You gotta have a president for the country to run it. So
I think it's important for college students to vote because I think we take up a lot of the new voter population now, since a lot of us couldn't vote in the previous election. And I think a lot of us have a lot of strong opinions that we should be able to share with everybody. And we should also just use those opinions to make a difference in the way that we would like to make a difference.
Well, I mean, it's part of our right as an American, and some countries don't have that right. So I think it's important to exercise your right.
We have a different sort of view on society, and like it's very helpful because we are like the future, and we're gonna be more affected by the changes that happen now.
I think it's important for people to vote so they can like show what is important to them, because without like going out and voting, you can't show like what is important to you specifically.
I think college students should vote because, we're the next generation. A lot of us are voting this year, and it's just very important because whatever we decide, whoever we vote for this year, it's going to affect all of our future basically, because both of the main candidates are very different with what they believe in, what they aspire to do in their presidency in the next 4 years. So I think it's very important that we pay attention and that we care, because if we don't, then our lives will definitely change very drastically in the next 4 years.
I think it's really important for young individuals to vote because, that's the only way that we can get our needs across. There are things that are important to us, and the only way to make our voices heard is to get out and vote for things.
Sharing political opinions can be difficult and stressful. Let's see how Marywood students think we can share opinions.
What do you think is a good way to share an opinion with someone else?
I think that you should probably start by if someone shares an opinion with you first, I think you should kind of, point out what you like or what you don't like about their opinion first of all. Just kind of say oh, well, I agree with this part of your opinion, but I think maybe I disagree in this part.
I think a good way to share an opinion with someone else is being very open-minded to their opinion as well, but also sharing your opinion in a way that's straightforward, but it's not making them feel bad for having an opinion about something that may differ from yours.
I think the best way to share opinions with someone else is to be respectful, to be open-minded, and to not be ignorant towards just every subject ever. Just be respectful, be understanding, be open to hearing new opinions while also sharing your opinions, and just try to educate others if they aren't aware of other topics. And for example, voting, please vote. So just not be rude. Understand that people have different opinions, have different perspectives, and maybe they just aren't aware of the circumstances that we're in. So no shame in that. Just it's better to get educated than just to be ignorant.
Just be honest. Be honest. If you feel a certain type of way, don't make it erratic. That's definitely the most important part, is not being erratic. Don't try your best not to stutter. Try your best to make eye contact and just be calm and collected. And if worst things comes to worst, you don't have to keep speaking. Of course, you could just end the conversation politely. There's no need for an altercation of words and a negative connotation. So definitely the best way there for sure.
Respectfully and confidently. I think it's important to share your opinions, even if you have different opinions as someone. I think it's important to communicate those things.
Maybe just telling your friends about it, and then they'll tell other people, and then it spreads out from there.
Well, you're sharing an opinion, so being willing to have them, have a different opinion, so being willing to have discourse.
I think when you have a very open discussion and you're not ready to jump the gun and just start arguing, when you're talking calmly, you have the facts and you want to just have a conversation with someone. Oh, I believe this candidate has does this really well, while this candidate doesn't really focus on this as much, and I'd like if they'd focus on that. If you had that kind of conversation, I think it would be more productive than just having a screaming, arguing match, which happens a lot when I try to talk to politics with people. But that's one way. It's easier to share an opinion, even when the opinions don't agree with each other.
Looks like we have some more results coming in thanks to our sources at NBC News. Before we get into the results, it looks like Milwaukee is recounting about 34,000 ballots due to human error. Hope they get things sorted out in Milwaukee real soon. But right now we do have some results from Arkansas. It looks like, no shocker here, it looks like they're calling the 6 electoral votes for Donald Trump. Looks like Trump is also taking Texas's 40 electoral votes. Trump is outperforming how he did in 2020 in the states of both Florida and Texas. If he keeps this up, he could have a shot at his first popular vote win. He did not win the popular vote when he ran in 2016. Looks like Kamala Harris could be seeing a victory in Illinois. Looks like they are calling the 19 electoral votes for the state of Illinois for Kamala Harris. And it looks like Trump is leading Georgia and North Carolina at the moment. If this trend continues for Trump, Kamala Harris will need to win Pennsylvania. Those are 19 crucial electoral votes that Harris would need if she wants to be elected the president. It looks like there could be a chance Kamala could take Pennsylvania because according to an AP poll, about 17% of the votes currently counted. Looks like Kamala is leading the PA polls with about 62%. Of course, we have in total we have about 17 states called for Donald Trump, and looks like we have 9 states currently called for the Democratic candidates. Before we throw to the panel, a little presidential fun fact for you. Former presidents Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton have each won Grammy Awards for their audio recordings of their memoirs. They are far from the first to be nominated, though. Who could forget the year the Grammys robbed William Howard Taft of a win for his long-forgotten blues album, Between a Tub and a Hard Place? We now go to our panel for some closing statements.
Thank you, Kyle. And before we close, thank you all for tuning in. It was a pleasure to moderate this bipartisan panel with both of you. I am, of course, Casey Jeanette. Lindsay, Zach, do you have any closing remarks?
I think in the next 48 hours, we're going to have the second president to have two terms, not consecutively, but I guess we'll see what happens.
I think that we are going to have our first woman president after hopefully not too many days of sitting around waiting. I want 3 days at least, but
3. I'll take less.
Less than 3.
Not like 2020.
It's important to have these kind of conversations, and we can have these kind of conversations civilly. We both understood where we each were coming from. I respect his points. I think you might respect my points.
I do. You got me. What can I say? It was very nice to debate you. I don't think it was a debate. It was a conversation.
It was a conversation. Yeah.
I also wouldn't say it was a debate. I think this is a great way to bring the country together, take care of that division, and being able to work with both sides. If it's one versus the other, it's harder to come up with solutions. So I think this is a great starting point and hopefully an inspiration for those in the country.
America, take notes.
We all want the best for our country.
Yes, we do. Amen.
All right, and we will send it over to conclude with Colby and Kyle. Thank you, guys.
Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to TV-Marywood's 2024 election coverage. This was a challenging yet rewarding endeavor for everyone involved, either on camera or behind the scenes.
Thank you so much to our panelists, Zach Houston and Lindsay Jason, and our moderator, Casey Jeanette. This is Colby Hughes
and Kyle Driscoll signing off.
You're watching live election coverage from TVM Studios at Marywood University.